Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of SynapThreads podcast. I'm Skylar Yu, host for this afternoon. SynapThreads is a global youth-led nonprofit organization dedicated to making neuroscience and neurological disorders more accessible through education, storytelling, and meaningful conversations.
And I'm Rohan Sengupta, co-host this afternoon. It's an honor to welcome you to the beginning of a journey that we hope will inspire curiosity, compassion, and a deeper understanding of the human brain.
I'm incredibly honored and excited to join by Dr. Janay Nugent, Associate Professor of History and Associate Dean in the Faculty of Arts and Science at the University of Lethbridge. I first met Dr. Nugent during SHAT this summer, and her lectures stayed with me long after it ended. While many people think of history as simply learning about the past, Dr. Nugent challenged me to see something much deeper. She reminded us that studying people, their stories, cultures, and experiences is about understanding what it means to be human. She's inspired so many students, including myself. And that idea resonated with me because it made me realize that even in neuroscience, we aren't just studying the brains, but we're studying the people. Although SynapThreads focuses on neuroscience, I wanted our very first episode to begin with the bigger questions. Can we really understand the brain without understanding the people around us? Dr. Nugent, thank you so much for joining us today. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to pursue history and the humanities?
Hi, Skylar and Rohan. I very much appreciate being on here today, so thank you so much for inviting me. It's quite an honor, and especially to be the first person. This is very exciting for me. And so my name is Janay Nugent. I am an associate professor in the Department of History and Religion at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. And I started my love of history probably from hearing my grandmother's stories. She loved history. She talked about history all the time. She was big into family history. I also loved reading when I was younger, and a lot of the stories that I followed were historical stories or stories about travel around the world. And so that just really inspired me to be very interested in sort of what cultures are out there, what other people are doing in other parts of the world, what people were doing in the past, and that sort of a thing. And then when I came to university, I took a history class. I had started out as a psychology major, actually, and fell in love with the history class and the history discipline. And I just kept on going. I never really intended to be a professor, but I was never quite done with my study of the past. And I think really it is about that humanities perspective that I find really exciting about studying history and about being in the humanities in the larger sort of picture of academia.
Yeah, but why do you think humanities stay like so super important in this like rapidly changing world when like so many people believe in science and math comes into play? Why do you think humanity still plays really like a big role?
Yeah, and I think that's a really big question. And I'm so
Mhm.
excited to get to talk about this because this is one of my big passion conversations. And I do love having this conversation.
Mhm.
Within academia, there's professional degrees where people follow, they study what they're going to eventually be studying. They need to learn the professional, both the knowledge, the ethics, the business around whatever it is that they're going to be working in. But then, sort of the more academic traditions that are not just professional sort of training are things like the sciences. And like you said, people understand and respect sciences is really super important, right? This is our key to unlocking how the world works, how the body works, how the brain works. And this is how we are going to solve really important key issues like global warming, ending cancer. These are the things that science is going to push forward. And so these are not things that people really need to be convinced about why they're important. But the social sciences and the humanities, there's also the creative arts as well, or the fine arts, which are all fields that I would say people don't immediately accept or understand why they're important or why we should be spending time studying them. And so with social sciences, it's more this sort of understanding of how societies work. So the big institutions, how they interact with one another, how they create power structures, those types of things. With the humanities and the fine arts, we're really looking at human beings. So from the fine arts perspective, that's creativity. Is it art? Is it music? Is it drama? What exactly are you looking at there with the fine arts? In the humanities, it really is about studying what it is to be a human being. And so there's a lot of different disciplines that fall into the humanities. History is one of them. And the humanities really are about studying what it is to be a human being, as you've already said. And I mean, that's very simplistic. All of these are very simplistic definitions. But the humanities looks at, what did we do as people in the past? How did we react to large historical events? And we can learn a lot by looking at that and finding patterns and understanding how human beings have behaved in the past. Philosophy is very much about how do human beings think? What are their ethics? What is logical to us? How do we think about logic? And those are really, really important questions. Modern languages or languages are really, really important. How do we communicate with each other? How do we what are our patterns of language? Those things mean a lot because they tell you so much about the culture and about the way people think when you study languages and linguistics. If you study literature, this is about what moves us. How, what are our stories? What inspires us? What captures our imagination? And these are all really important things because that is what it is to be a human. You can't use science to understand those things necessarily. Maybe a little bit. You can a little bit, but it really is about human beings and how we are going to respond to the world around us, how we're going to interact with one another. And I think that those things are really, really important for us to understand because very often we forget that people are their own sort of agents. They're going to react and respond to the world in distinct and unique ways based on the context, based on who they are as a human being, what moves them, what inspires them, what their ethics are based on, and that sort of a thing. So, if we really want to understand people, we need to be studying the humanities because that trains us in understanding human beings.
I think that's the perfect segment to the next question we had. So, SynapThreads, it focuses on neurological disorders. So, some people might wonder, what does history really have to do with neuroscience, and how would you really answer that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I think that it is not necessarily just about being a historian, although, I mean, we can definitely look at like neurodivergency in the past and how people reacted to, living a life of neurodivergency in a world that wouldn't have recognized, understood it, and then how their societies in response and their communities, their families, responded to individuals who were neurodivergent. So we definitely can take a look at some of those things on sort of a very specific level, but in a much broader sort of sense of studying the humanities, I think it's really important because it reminds us that people are not just bodies or medicalized or just brains, right? So often in the sciences, we forget that there's a human being or an individual behind the science of the body or what we're trying to understand or unlock as a piece of knowledge. And I think of the world and our understanding of the world and academia as a large puzzle. And every person who is working in those fields is pushing to try to add another piece to the puzzle, help us understand something. And individuals are their own puzzles. And so if we don't look at the human being behind the sort of scientific understanding of the brain, then we are really missing out because each individual comes with their own unique set of circumstances and contexts. and their own stories. And I know that's something that Skylar is really keen on is stories. And I think that's really important. In history, so much of it is people's stories. That's what survives to us, are people's stories. And if you can really hear the individual stories and understand where they're coming from, how they're experiencing the world, then you really do push yourself so much further in terms of understanding individuals and improving people's lives and circumstances and experiences.
Yeah, so you said the stories also shape how we like do, but what about like the cultures? How can understanding different cultures change the way we think about health and neurological disorders as well as like the humanities side?
Yeah, and so I mean, for me, history
Mm-hmm.
is very much a different culture. It's people in the past, and so it might be, somebody who, and so sorry, let me try that again. The the history is very much about understanding different cultures because the people in the past, they're living in different contexts, different technologies, different economies, different politics, and so different religions, or at least emphasis on what the religions are and how they're practiced and understood, and the role that they play in society. And so these are all things that shape who they are as individuals. So history is, to me, just another form of studying another culture. And understanding other cultures brings different contexts. You understand different ways in which individuals interact or have a place within their societies and within their cultures. And you can begin to understand and look at things that might be really influential or helpful in terms of improving someone's circumstances, but also challenging or identifying the things that were really harmful and difficult for individuals to experience. And so I think that by studying different cultures, by studying history, you really get a perspective on how human beings um, treat individuals who might be outside the mainstream, or and that if you want to do that study, it's really, really important because that definition is very cultural. And if we want to challenge that there is a mainstream and that there is a norm, that we need to begin to understand how different cultures and societies identify individuals as being outside of the norm. Because what we're trying to do in much of the world today is to create a much broader perspective and accept that everybody is part of the norm, right? And that, but that is a struggle and that is a challenge because when you get to very basic things like building a building, for example, they will, whatever is built for whatever a building codes are, it's for what most people, it's good for most people. And if you really want to begin to challenge that, you have to look at, all individuals and not just, your like 60% of the population or whatever it is. So you have to really, really begin to challenge those things.
Yeah, we had an interesting question. So, if you're designing like a medical school curriculum, what like humanities lessons do you think every like future physician should learn?
Yes. Okay, so this is very interesting. I actually have a colleague who works in humanities medical division at the University of Edinburgh. And Edinburgh University has just been celebrating their 350th anniversary of the school. And so they have been doing all sorts of really fascinating and interesting things to connect with individuals on the humanities level. And so it's everything from like, let's look at historically and so her particular area of research is reproductive justice. And so she's like, so they'll, bring in a historical model and they'll ask people to say, how did we look at birth control or women's bodies in the past? And then how were doctors, because of the way in which we understood the body, how did doctors interact with women in the different types of questions? And you can see that women were often medicalized. And that meant that their personal experiences were lost. And that I think is what really a humanities perspective would bring to medical school. So I really do think it's about looking at the past, looking at how individuals have been treated within the medical system, and asking questions about what that meant for the patients, and how they were treated, and what their experiences were, and how comfortable they were coming to their doctors to ask questions, and to challenge maybe traditional forms of medicine, to begin to push forward a much more open and inclusive medical system. And so the humanities background in medical school, I think, is really, really important so that we move away from just a medicalized body, but understanding individuals and their contexts and their experiences and how that's shaping their experiences, but also the medical question that's being asked about them.
Sorry, I was muted. Many of our listeners are like high school students or university students. How can students become stronger critical thinkers by paying closer attention to people around them? Because sometimes we don't realize like how like this really does, and like how could humanity play a role in like helping them?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. And I do think that this is something that is really, really important.
Mhm,
When we study our subjects, we often forget about the individuals and the people around us. But if we listen to other people's stories, listen to other people's perspectives, and I think the biggest piece in all of that with the
mhm,
humanities is understanding where they're coming from, especially if their perspective seems different than yours. And because people are not, irrational by nature. They're coming to you with, from their context, from their logic, from their experiences, from the things that move them. And when you can really understand people, you can interact with them in a much more effective way, because it's like, I have a respect for you. I
mhm,
respect where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from. I might still have a different perspective, or I might have, if I was, a medical student and I was coming in with a medical way of approaching an individual, that's still probably my main interest, is helping that individual from a medical perspective. But if we don't listen to their stories, if we don't try to understand them, you can prescribe all you want, a medication or a course of treatment or a way of acting or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to do, whatever the medical response is. But unless that it makes sense to that individual and that individual sees value in it, they're not going to engage with it, right? They're not going to follow that your professional medical advice. And so understanding and thinking, just thinking about human beings as human beings and trying to understand where they're coming from, how they're thinking, why they're thinking the things that they are, and respecting that, uh, then you end up with like an impasse, right? You kind of are speaking on two sides of a wall, and you're not going to be able to transfer information back and forth, or proper treatments, or whatever it is that you're trying to engage with that individual. And so I think that really stopping and thinking about an individual and what's going to speak to them, and understanding why the things that you might want them to take or take on board, or follow in terms of advice, um, why they might not do that. That's really, really important, because then you respect that, and you might end up having to come up with an alternate solution. And so I think that understanding the individual or the human as a person, and really pushing forward that respect and that understanding is what is going to ultimately allow individuals to be more effective in their either personal engagements or in their professional work, or whatever it is that's happening in interactions between human beings.
Oh yeah, thank you for that response. I was also wondering how young people can become agents of change within their communities, like could be respective to humanities or any other like general methods.
Yeah, thank you. And so this is one of the things that I study. I study the 16th century Scotland, and I study young people, children and youth. And one of the things that I'm really, really interested in is how young people are able to shape their environment, even in an environment that is very patriarchal, where young people have there's really no legal, laws protecting them. They are the property of their parents or their masters if they are, out in service or something like that. And so I'm really, really curious about young people because they are everywhere in the historical record and they are on the front lines of change all the time. They are the individuals who are incredibly passionate. They are able to kind of come together and tell their stories and try to push forward what they think is right in the world. And so I think that young people are very much agents of change. And I think in our world right now, today, young people are inspiring when they come together and they are bold and brave and they have a voice. And they are able to, because of that, because you are young, that uh, often people think, well, you should be shy or insecure or all of these different things, and that is really, really bold and brave to have a voice. And so people stop and listen. Because when you look at power structures in society, age is one of them, right? You're not an adult until you're 18. You have to listen to your parents to a certain extent, have to go to school. All of these different things that society tells you you must do. But when young people are able to sort of embrace their own power and their own voice and their own stories and step out to share them with other individuals and with society, people stop and listen because it's extra brave than if somebody who's 50 is doing that, or in a position of real power, right? Like, who cares if a politician's telling you their personal story? Like, I mean, it matters. It matters. Everybody's story matters, but it's not as inspiring as somebody who is young and who is really thoughtful and respectful. And really, for me, a lot of young people and organizations that are led by youth are the most inspiring because in this world where respect of individuals is really beginning to be less the norm or less the expectation, young people are often at the front lines of leadership and setting the tone for how that respectful interaction and conversation has to go or should be going. And so I actually think that young people, I mean, there's the old platitude, youth are our future, children are our future. I mean, that's true. That's very much true. But it's much more important, like it's much bigger than that, right? It's not just that you're the leaders of tomorrow, you're also the leaders of today. And so I think that as I study, young people and how they're able to sort of use their circumstances, use their voices to tell their stories and to fight for the change that they feel is in their best interests, but also broader best interests of society. that I see that happening in the modern world today as well. And youth-led movements, I think, are really very much the future. And people do listen, and so I think that young people having a voice is very important. And so getting that voice out and having it heard in whatever way makes the most sense to an individual. So podcasts for you too. Um, but for some people it's art, some people it's literature, storytelling. Um, some people it's music. Some people it's, speaking in classes or in front of groups or organizations or getting involved in different groups, right, that are out there working in community. That having young people as a voice at those tables is really, really important. I was on the board of governors at the university for a while, and there is no stronger voice than the voice of the students, because the university is theirs. And as soon as a student speaks, everybody on that board stops and listens. It's way more important than like a faculty member or somebody who's within the system. It's about the young people's voice, because what they have to say, and their experiences completely shape the institution. And so, um, really, I can't stress more strongly how important it is for young people to get out and to have a voice. And I know that it's a kind of a fraught world, because with the social media, you never know what kind of response you're going to get back. And so that can be a bit of a dangerous or uncomfortable space. It can get there, so you do need to be, strong and willing to kind of put yourself out there. But I think overall, that if young people kind of band together and support one another and tell their stories, that's how really youth are at the forefront of change.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much because that really like pushed me to keep going with my initiative and how important it is to like outside of work. So since you talked about how and the young individuals are making change in this world, looking back, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, that's an interesting one. Okay, so what would I say to my younger self? I think that it would be probably to I mean, I was always kind of bold and said whatever I felt, which which could sometimes get me, into a situation where I had critics. And I think that probably that's the biggest thing that I would need to learn as a younger person is to be less concerned about what my critics are saying. I mean, you want to listen to your critics because they might have really good points, and that dialogue back and forth will only make what you have to say stronger, and more fully thought out. And so I think that's really important. But I wouldn't spend as much of my time being stressed or upset about somebody who's being critical about what I have to say. And so I think that that would be probably the biggest thing. Like, go ahead and be the voice and say what you think and fight for what you think is right. Really, continue to listen and respect other people's perspectives. But at the same time, just have confidence that, what you're saying is really, really important. And that that if there's anybody who is a detractor or somebody who's going to challenge you, tell you you can't do it, or they don't like what you're saying, don't worry about it. Right? Like, don't let it take up too much of your time and space. That's what I think I would probably tell myself.
Now that we looked at the past, I was wondering when you're like looking at the future, what you think about the future, and is there anything specific that gives you hope?
Ooh, yes. Well, I mean, honestly, I do think that the future, hope for the future is really about uh, individuals learning to respect one another and come together to bring a breadth of perspectives. So whether it's scientific, professional perspectives, social sciences, fine arts, or humanities, but all of those perspectives need to be at the table. And I think that For me, and I mean, I am a university professor, but education really is that future. Because as you study different fields and you're exposed to a breadth of different ideas and a breadth of different stories, that the types of solutions that will be developed for the really challenging world that we're moving into and that we're currently in, that those solutions are going to be complex and they're going to be hopefully respectful and putting human beings at the center of their of the solutions. And so I do think that young people and education are really what give me hope for the future, to help to sort of solve the challenges that exist and to try to have a human-centric solutions and not just an economic-centric or political-centric or religious-centric or whatever. It's about individuals and people, no matter what their contexts or experiences are.
Yeah, so finally, what message would you like to leave for students interested in making a positive impact in the world?
Okay. Well, I don't want to be repetitive because I've already said a lot of what I
Yeah.
would say that I'd like students to know. But it really is about, I think, don't be afraid. Try different things. There's a lot of competing opinions out there. Uh, Trust your gut and your instincts about what you feel is right, and how you think you as an individual can make the most change and have the most meaningful life that you can have for yourself. And just trust yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces. And don't shy away from the hard things because there's lots of hard things out there. And so I think, again, that's very much about a human perspective, right? What is your story? What is your context? What moves you? What's ethical to you? Embrace those things. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid to keep pushing and to put yourself out there because those are the things that are going to bring about both individual meaning to your life, but also for you to be able to improve the world around you, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to come here and have a conversation with me. So that's it for the questions. I'm sure a lot of you inspire a lot of people because personally I learned a lot from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun. I really appreciate it.
To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us for the very first episode of SynapThreads. Remember, every story begins with a connection.
Every connection becomes a thread.
And together, those threads will help us better understand the brain and the people behind it.
Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep weaving hope.